promoting abstinence is something that I've been really passionate about for a while now. About a year ago, I went to Washington, D.C. with the Heritage Foundation and spoke to a lot of congressmen about trying to keep abstinence education in schools. Unfortunately, it didn't go over so well because just a lot of the leaders didn't agree with our stance. And so I just want to start this speech by talking about the other side, why people do have sex before marriage. And I think I found that for both guys and girls, curiosity is a big factor. They just, everybody in the world talks about sex. It's a big deal. And so people get curious and impatient, and so they have sex. And I think for guys specifically, it's harder to fight their flesh on this, and so a lot of guys have premarital sex because of lustful reasons. And some girls are like that also, but I think it's harder for guys than it is for girls. And I think a big reason that girls will have premarital sex is because they want to have that emotional connection with the guy, and they think that the guy will want to stay. They try to keep a guy by having that attachment, but it's a lot of times it's not the same for boys. But I can't speak completely for the general public, so I think that's the main reason. And also, if you're not a Christian, all you can see is yes, that there's risk, but it's kind of hard because God is not a big reason for why you won't do it. And because the world's telling us that sex before marriage isn't a big deal, and waiting until the wedding night is pretty old-fashioned, and it seems unnecessary. And Elizabeth Elliot actually wrote a pretty good quote about this. This is from her book, Passion and Purity. I just talked about her in my last speech, but that book again, very good. And she says here, this is talking about the world's view of premarital sex. Everybody's free. Nobody is hung up anymore or needs to deny himself anything. In fact, nobody ought to deny himself anything he wants badly. It's dangerous. It's unhealthy. It's sick. If it feels good and you don't do it, you're paranoid. If it doesn't feel good and you do it, you're a masochist. And I think that is so true, and that's why the world looks at Christians and thinks we're crazy, because we do things that don't feel good, and we don't do things that do satisfy our flesh. And so we seem crazy. We seem like we are sick to deny ourselves to the world, and we have to keep that in mind, that they just see it as fighting for holiness, something that's completely insane. And that's just a generalization. Not everyone thinks that who's not a Christian, but a lot of times that is a big viewpoint. And so when I was working in the Heritage Foundation, we weren't able to use our faith at all to back up our beliefs about abstinence. And so here's the student manual right here. And mostly what we would talk about in here is we would list the STD facts, and we would talk about how just the emotional consequences of having sex. And so there's a lot of obvious physical and emotional consequences of having sex. And so you don't have to be a Christian to see that. But I think, since I am speaking to a Christian audience right now, I want to read a verse to you that has really, really helped me in my struggle for purity. And it's from 1 Peter 1:14, and it says, "As obedient children, do not conform any longer to the desires you had when you lived in ignorance, but instead, as he who called you is holy, you also be holy in all that you do." And I think it's just so huge, because we want to conform so much to the world because it pulls on us. It really does. But we've got to fight against that flesh and what the world around us is doing and be holy. And it's so hard. But the results of that are so satisfying. And I think that fighting temptation has enormous benefits every single time, and that's for sure. And so I just want to leave you with just a couple thoughts, and that's that the truth is, sex is a beautiful thing, and God created it to be between a man and woman, in their marriage to unite them together. And unfortunately, we have rebelled against God's holy and perfect design for us, and tried to take it into our own hands, just like Adam and Eve did. Like he said, don't take that fruit, and they believed, oh well, he's withholding something from me. He doesn't love me. He's withholding something good from me. What he was doing is he was protecting them, and he's trying to protect us too. But so many times we want to take it into our own hands and just basically we call God a liar, saying that, oh, he didn't mean that. He didn't know what he was saying. He knows what he's saying when he tells us not to do things. It's for our own good and to give him glory in the end, and that ultimately gives us glory and us joy. And one thing that is pretty huge is when we disobey God, when we willfully disobey him, we're telling him that we don't love him, and that's something pretty big. Matthew Henry actually, in his commentary on 1 John 2, which is actually, I might as well go ahead and read that too, because it really goes into what we're talking about here with abstinence. He says, "Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh and the desires of the eyes and pride in possessions, is not from the Father but from the world. And the world is passing away along with its desires, but whoever does the will of God abides forever." And so what he said, his commentary is, the world draws the heart from God, and the more the love of the world prevails, the more the love of God decays. And so I just hope, guys, that we love God enough to obey him. And so I just want to leave you guys with that, because I know it's such a struggle, especially as we are in, we're in college and we're meeting people that we think we're going to marry, and it is hard to fight, but we have to love God enough to fight and trust that one day it's going to be a wonderful, beautiful, amazing thing. We've got to wait for it. We've got to obey him. So that's everything. Thanks for listening.